Right, I have 12 positions from games to go through here, every single one of which has a theme of horizontal cutoff somewhere in it, in the sense that we need to analyse what move we want to play next with a view to, well, if I do that and he does that, then we're going to get that position. That's a horizontal cutoff, and I know that's a loss for me or a win for me or whatever. Or I know that particular one's a draw because it's an imperfect horizontal cutoff or whatever. Strongly recommend you watch the Rook and Pawn versus Rook horizontal cutoff 1 video before starting with this. But otherwise, yeah, let's just get started. This first one's from 1969. It's black to play. Pause the video and decide what should you do here? What should black's move be? So in the game, king takes e4 was played, and it throws away the game. White just played king g2, black plays rook h8, king g3, rook g8. It's a horizontal cutoff. It's a knight's pawn. It's over. Rook a5. I think black even resigned there. So you can't play king takes e4 because you're going to get that horizontal cutoff position. Instead, you should play rook g6 and go after the g pawn. And there's not really much that white can do about this, to be honest. If king f2, we can just take the g pawn, king f3, and then we can take the e pawn. Okay. Or if instead of king f2, white plays g5, trying to hold on to the g pawn, then we can take the e pawn. Okay. And after rook a5, king f4, the pawn's gone. So in the original position, king takes e4 is an absolute disaster. You've got to go after the g pawn, and in fact if you do go after the g pawn, you win both pawns pretty quickly anyway. So nice easy start. Next, much harder. This is a game from 1989. What would you do here as black? Black to play. Pause the video. Decide on your next move. So in the game, b5 was played, and it's now a win for white. A takes b5, rook takes b5. I mean, if we saw rook takes g4, that's very bad news. b6, rook g7, king a4, you can see that that's just a disaster. So a takes b5, rook takes b5. White temporarily defends the g pawn, rook c4. King d2 was played in the game, but if it was king e3, we'd get something pretty similar. Yeah, king a4, rook across to g5. And white's trick is just to go around and collect the a pawn with the rook. You might see king c3 check, king back to a3, and that's actually transposed to the game. So instead of king e3, if black just played something like king d2, king a4, rook g5, you can see it's very similar. The rook swung around to pick up the a pawn. Rook takes g4 check, king a3. I think black actually resigned here, but if rook g1, then rook c5 check, king d4, b4, and the horizontal cutoff has been reached, and we know that that's a win. So you can't play b5, and the simpler just take the pawn is the drawing method. Rook takes g4, rook takes b6. And you can just sort of go for a passive defense here because white's king is so inactive. Rook g8, and whichever way white attack your b pawn, that seems the more active way of doing it, you just defend it. I mean, if rook a6, we'll just say rook g5. And I mean, how does white progress here? If the pawn gets pushed, you just come in king c4. That's going to be a draw. If white tries to get their king in the game, they can't get their king in the game. You just do nothing. You just defend the a pawn. And if white tries to make progress with like rook d5 check, king e4, white's either got to relinquish control of the fifth rank or the d file. and then your king come back to d4 if they relinquish control of the d file. So rook to d1, say, but now they're no longer hitting your a pawn, and the white king is so passive. So rook c7, black just holds that. I mean, this isn't necessarily a sort of a known drawing position particularly, but if b5 is played, it leads fairly quickly to, almost by force, in fact by force if white wants it, to the horizontal cutoff. So you can't play b5 in the original position. Right, next, this is white to play this time. Can white save this game? As a general rule, when you've got two connected pawns against one with rooks on the board, it's usually pretty bad news. That's my own personal experience. It's pretty bad news for the side that has won. But, it's quite close to promotion. Can we do something here? Pause the video, white to play. How do we save this game? So in the game, rook d4 was played. It's a losing move, just swapping the b pawn for the h pawn. And the key is that after rook takes h4 check, where it sort of just looks fine for white. You're defending against a knight's pawn, your king's getting back. But black can play this rook h6, and you can't swap the rooks. So in the game, rook g4 was played. I mean, black could actually play rook d6 here, and we've got a 3-file vertical cutoff where that pawn's going to be getting to the third rank, which is actually a win as well. But on the horizontal cutoff theme, the white king can just sort of be cut off straight away, rook h3, and there's not really much that white can do to stop the black king and pawn advancing. So king d4, king h6, king e4, g5, and this king's going to be coming forward, and we're going to get the perfect cut in a minute with that pawn coming forward. So in the game, king f5 was played, just sort of desperately trying to stop that, but then black transformed everything into a vertical cutoff, and by occupying this first rank, the white rook just hasn't got enough space now. Even though this pawn's on black's fourth rank, they couldn't bring their rook back to g1. I mean, white didn't go for it, but we could see check, 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 and the black king has zigzagged its way to that thing I talked about, where the black king can attack the rook and defend its g-pawn at the same time, not literally, but with that little zigzag. So white didn't go for that. White played king e3 in the game, king h4. A few more moves were played, but really, oh, there we go. We're going to see the zigzag thing now, and then white resigned. So you might not know where you're going with king c5, which is actually the drawing move. Like you might not know where you're going with it, but it was reasonably clear to analyse rook d4 down to that horizontal cutoff, which just loses. So you might as well try something different. Black's going to get on with pushing their pawns, obviously g5. And there's a couple of ways to save this position from here, both of which the theme of interference is quite up there. So one nice way of doing it is rook d7 check. If the king goes to the back rank, that's obviously suicide, because after b7 we would be threatening rook d8 check and followed by queening. We've also got rook d5 as well there, haven't we, as well? King g8, you've got rook d5 as well. Come back, and that g-pawn sort of pretty indefensible. So yeah, the king would come forward, king g6, b7. The black rook could take that straight away, but we're gonna be okay to defend against those pawns and maybe get some sort of tail hook if it's rook versus these two pawns here. So the black rook could take straight away. More sensible might be to push the pawn, but here come the interference tricks. Rook d6 check, king f5, rook b6. You might be thinking back here, instead of to get out of that interference trick, isn't black better off just bringing their king forward? Okay, but if king f5, we'd see rook d5 check, and I don't care whether you go up or down. my next move is to check you and bring my rook to the b file. You know, whether it's that or that. So interference, trickery, tactics was White's way out of this horrible position where it looks like the rook's just going to take that pawn in a minute, by which point you'll have two connected pass pawns on the 6th rank and a king supporting them as well. If one of them's still on the 5th rank, it's just gone. But yeah, we had that interference trick. So yeah, rook d6 check, king f5. Even this isn't over, by the way. Engine says 0.0. So I wouldn't fancy that, but you can see that White's still in the game at the very least. Don't have to play rook d7. Another way out of things here is rook d3, just stopping the advance of the h pawn for now. So black might bring their king in, we go and support the b7 push, and if g4, same sort of trickery. Rook d6 check. If the king comes forwards, there it is. King g7, that ends in a draw apparently. Again, you can see White's still in the game. And if the king goes back, I haven't... have I covered the king going back from there? Oh yeah, if the king goes back, then we can just play rook d4. And we're going to be winning one of those pawns, and then even if we lose our rook for the other one, we can see this is going to be enough to draw the game for us. So yeah, again, very, very hard to see all those interference tricks and all those tactics going on that follow on after king c5. But what we can say is if we play rook d4 and just swap pawns, that's all fairly forcing. I don't think it's that hard to see rook h6. And then, I mean, black has got different winning moves here, although a lot of, oh yeah, one of them's the vertical cutoff and one of them's just offering this rook swap straight away and then probably doing, again, either the vertical cutoff or the horizontal cutoff. But on the theme of horizontal cutoff, rook h3 is going to win it because this king and this pawn are going to be able to advance to create that perfect cut. Next, this is a game from 1956. It is black to play. Pause the video and decide what would you do here as black. So again, similar to the last one, the move you have to play, it's not necessarily clear where it goes other than it might go somewhere. What is, I think, calculable, whatever the word is that the move played in the game, which was rook a1, leads fairly quickly to a lost position because of horizontal cutoff. So rook a1 was played, rook f5, black pushed the g pawn. I guess in the original position the rooks, just trying to think why black didn't want to push the g pawn straight away. I suppose it's going to be similar, to be honest, a similar sort of idea. So rook a1 wasn't preparing g4 particularly, it was just that was black's plan. I guess you might as well wait till the pawns hit before you pushed it, might have been black's thinking. F takes g4, king takes e4, king g3, it's a perfect cut. I mean, we could go through the rest of the game, but we've done that. We've done how horizontal cut off, yeah, and the Lucena position has been reached. Black even carried on for a little bit. Got converted a bit strangely, but there you go, it got converted. So in the original position, you know, rook a1 was played with the idea of g4. It's just a horizontal cutoff, and it's gone. That's like 3-4 moves deep. So what are you going to do? Because obviously this is not a great situation. Well, the white king's not in a brilliant place. So rook e2 check is actually a drawing move here. King g3, and then you go rook back to e1. If king g4 is played, we could see check, king h5, king d4, and if the rook attacks the g pawn, we can attack the f pawn. And that swap of pawns would actually just be fine for black. And if instead of king g4, white went for the g pawn immediately with rook f5, then black's got some tactics sneakery here. Rook g1 check, king h2 hits the rook, and king f2. And I don't think there's anything at all that white can do about this perpetual here. So we're just going to see the game finish in perpetual check heaven. I'm just looking at whether if is f4 dangerous. I mean, you still got the perpetual check. Do you actually risk losing the game? I don't think so. But black can still play g4, and they've still got the perpetual check stuff if they need it. But white would have to be careful that they're not going to lose the game there, though I don't think they are. Maybe they are, you know. I wonder. So I'm just interested here. Just gone on the side. No, it's still drawn. g4. You need to get your rook out of there. I think one more careless move and you might be losing that. Let me just see. Yeah, sorry, I'm right, because I've just the top 5 moves by the engine are rook a5, rook b5, rook c5. Yeah, you have to get your rook out of there ready to deliver some checks. Anything else, and you're falling into this mating net, aren't you? Rook g2, king h1, g3, and rook g1 mate is unavoidable. Anyway, sorry, that was just me getting sidetracked by tactics. Right, next, this is a game from 1998. It is white to play. What do you reckon you should do? I'll give you a choice. Either rook d7 check or rook takes d6 straight away. Which one should you go for? You might be starting to pick up a sort of another theme to this video on top of horizontal cutoff, in that all the games seem to be featuring, well, in the game they did this, which was a right disaster, but what they should have done was this, and it's the same. So in the game, rook takes d6 was played, and I don't think it takes much calculation to see that this leads to a perfect horizontal cut. Rook takes h4, king e5, king g7, rook came back to d1, king h6, rook g1, g5, it's there. Okay, well, this is why I think it's just so important to have that knowledge. In the previous video I covered how you win these horizontal cutoffs. They're not difficult to win, and white just sort of laboured on in this game. I mean, another 10 moves or so were played, and you know it's just hard to know why the moves were played on. It's just gone. But it's only about three or four moves away to see that black can achieve that card. I mean, that's black's 4th move after your opening rook takes d6. I think that's calculable. I think, or calculatable. I must learn what the word is for that. And it might be that you haven't got anything else. You're just stuffed. But once you've realised that that's going to lead to the horizontal cutoff, you should just be doing everything you can to avoid it. Not least because it's not like the other side needs to know what they're doing when they get to that horizontal cutoff. You've seen me play against Stockfish in the last video, and it's you don't really need to do much. You just sort of make it up as you go along, doing sensible stuff, and you convert it. So it was this path around this side of the knight's pawn that was a nightmare, a nightmare for white there. Rook d7 check stops that. King f6, rook takes d6 arrives with check, and when the king comes forward, your white king is not getting cut off. Don't play king d4, where you'd be swapping your rooks and losing the game. King c4, rook takes h4 check, king d3, and yeah, the white king is not getting cut off. Black might say, yes it is. Look at this, vertical cutoff, 2 files. And there's nothing you can do to stop me getting my pawn to the 4th rank, so I'm going to be doing that, dropping the rook back, and I'm going to do Gregorio's combined method to win that game. You can't stop me pushing my g pawn to g5. Yes, I can. Oh, so that would be a draw. Next, 1996 game. Black to play. Black's winning this, but how do you convert it? Black's only got 1 winning move. Pause the video, see if you can find out what it is. This rook's looking a bit silly over here anyway. This pawn's not going to last for long unless you just leave your rook looking silly over here for the rest of the game. And you can't really do much to stop the white king getting back. And it's a knight's pawn, which means that even first rank defense is going to work. Even if white can't get the Philidor set up, first rank, which they blatantly can, first rank defense is going to work. So you've really only got one winning try, and that's to stop this rook being so silly. I mean, at the moment you can't take this because this rook's attacking your g pawn anyway. And if the b pawn falls, well, at least you've won that. You know, if you could swap those two pawns, great. So let's move that silly rook and let's put it somewhere that does some damage. Rook a4, just cut off the white king. Rook takes b6 check. King takes g5. King tries to come across. And we've got the horizontal cutoff. Or we could have seen back there, instead of king f5, rook h1 check and rook h4. Even king back to g6 was good enough there. But yeah, king f5, rook f4 check, rook f3, and horizontal cutoff has been reached. We know it's a win. I'll go through the moves of how it was converted. But we can see that the Lucena position is nigh. Here it comes. There it is. That's a mad move. Fair enough. Not your textbook conversion, but done. So yeah, rook a4 in the original position. Brilliant move. Cuts off the white king. Wins the game. Next, white to play in this 1999 game. Choose between rook b1, king e5, and king e4. Choose between those three moves. So finding the draw here is pretty hard. Again, trying to analyze, trying to study, the various themes, vertical cutoffs, horizontal cutoff, Philidor, Lucena, Klingenhorwitz, longside defense. None of them can be studied in a vacuum, and you'll quite frequently find horizontal cutoff and vertical cutoff ended up sort of be a bit of a mix and match. You've seen me transpose horizontal cutoff into vertical cutoff in a lot of the things I did against Stockfish in that previous video, for example. I find the vertical cutoff stuff quite, relatively easier. I like it. Just a personal preference, I suppose. The drawing method here is going to revolve around a two-file vertical cutoff where black can't do Grigoriev's combined method because there's not enough space over here. Okay, remember, the Grigoriev combined method doesn't work for a knight's pawn because the black king hasn't got enough space. So pretty hard to work that out. So if you went for king e5, bad luck. Black just immediately challenges the rook, and there's not really much you can do here as white. It's gone. You might think to come and attack the b pawn, but the trick that black's got here is rook c4. White kind of wants to play two moves at once here. They want to play king d5 because this is now an imperfect cut. We've got an imperfect cut. The rook's controlling white's fourth rank with the black pawn still back on white's sixth rank. So white wants to have their king here, which is the great place for it. And remember, with an imperfect cut, we need to be controlling the a file. Whoever controls the a file first gets the desirable result. The problem is that you haven't got your king in the right spot in time. So if you go for the a file now, then black can just push the pawn, and this is just too late. So we can come in king b6, and we've got control of the c5 square, which was the important thing. So where were we? Yeah, so king e5, challenge the rooks. If rook b1, rook c4, I don't know, white might try instead king d5, and then you go rook a4. So we're controlling the a file in this imperfect cut, and there's nothing that's going to stop these two moves, basically. Well, you might see a king in and then a check. We're about to see that in one of the other variations. After the challenge of rooks, you think, okay, well, if the a file is so important, I'll go there straight away. But then we'll see rook c4, and it's because you haven't got the king d5 move in time. That wouldn't be possible usually, because the white king would just take it. But the white king wasn't on d5 ready to take it. So king e5 doesn't do it. In the game, rook b1 was tried, and it led to some pretty similar stuff. Rook d4, king e5. We know the a file is what you need to control if there's an imperfect cut going on, which there is. King d5, king a6, and here we go. We see an attempt to stop b5, but we see rook c4 check, king d5, and then b5. That was the thing I was talking about a minute ago. So to draw this, you kind of have to try and avoid the horizontal cut with king e4. But what you're doing there is you're basically saying, I admit I'm in a vertical cutoff by 2 files, and I'm not even going to try and do anything about it, which doesn't seem like a clever idea, because once this pawn's got to black's 4th rank, the 2 file vertical cutoff is usually enough. And it would be if you moved everything on the chessboard 1 square further that way. It's just a win for black. We'd see Grigoriev's combined method with the black king would eventually get to, well, it's a3, or it's actually whatever one square is off the chessboard that's just been moved to a3. And, you know, I covered that in the vertical cutoff video. I showed how my opponent at a game I played in the Major Open at the British Championships executed it perfectly, much to my annoyance. And yeah, go and have a look at that if you don't know what I'm talking about. But here it doesn't work. The 2 file vertical cutoff isn't good enough because we can just do the good defense, which is having our rook delivering checks from the front, and our king has to hover around in the right place. So after king b6, there's still a way to chuck this away. There's only one drawing move, and it's king e3. You've got to have your king controlling these squares and stopping the black rook coming to them. There's just no way for black to make progress here. Any charge up the board with a king is just going to be met with check, 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 and there's just nowhere for the black king to hide. We're stopping the rook coming to these squares, but I think there's some lines actually where it's good to stop the black king coming to those squares as well. I think if we'd gone up to e5, I think that's now a loss. It is, yeah, rook d2 or rook d3. I guess because the rook's ready to provide cover. We're building a bridge as the king does its zigzaggy thing. I think that's the idea. So just make sure your king's here. I think I did it in blue, didn't I? Let's keep the colours going. Guarding those squares there. So pretty hard find, that draw. So you really need to know your vertical cutoffs and horizontal cutoffs incredibly well. I mean, imagine I'm in that position in a game. Who plays king e4? Someone who really understands their horizontal and vertical cutoffs very, very well. A very instructive position, actually. I don't know. If you're down the club in 6 months' time, show me this position. Say, go on then, John, white to play, what would you do? I bet I'll get it wrong. Hard, isn't it? Next, 1946 game. Black to play. Much more going on in this one. What would you do? Can you find a way to convert this for black? So there are a couple of winning moves based on sort of different methods, or one of them actually sort of going around in circles and then eventually getting back to the same idea. But a reasonably simple way to convert this, which the player at the time found, is just push the g pawn. Okay? Just the player with the black piece is calculated, if I play g4, I'm going to be converting this into a horizontal cutoff very soon. g4, h takes g4, rook f4 check, king takes e5, rook takes g4. In the game, king f6 was played, and we see rook f4 check, king e5, g5, and we have the perfect cut. And the game carried on, rook b1, king g6, rook back up to b6, king h5, rook b1, and then black just came down and made the bridge. In fact, that's the mirror image of the position we just saw a minute ago, isn't it? And how I said you wanted the king needs to be on e3, controlling those squares, because we know the Grigoriev combined method doesn't work with a knight's pawn, but if you can get your rook down here, it's a win anyway. So king f6 was tried at this point in the game. What about if white plays rook b8? That's a bit of a nuisance. And indeed, if you just push the g-pawn, you blunder away the win. You see rook h8 check, king g6, rook g8, king back to f7, and just king f5, and that's a draw. So you don't want to play g5, but just get your rook off to the side, rook a4. Clear that you've got the g5 square free for the king. So if rook h8 check, king g5, rook down to h1, challenge the rooks, check, king h5, king f6, and now we'd see rook f4 check, king e5 and g5. Again, we've got the perfect cut. Or if instead of rook h8 check, if white tries to stop your king coming to g5, then you get the perfect cut straight away. I mean, there are a couple of opening moves. Like I say, g4 is the best move, but rook e6 looks a bit passive, but does eventually lead to a win apparently, and just rook f5 is also a winning move. But yeah, the play with the black pieces just worked out. If I do this, I'm going to get the perfect cut very soon. And the game ended there. White resigned. Right, next, how are we doing with these games? Got another 3 to go after this one. We're rattling through them. I say we're rattling through them. Over half an hour of video. I'm just going to keep going there. They're all good. White to play. This is a game from 1902. What did white play in this position? Pause the video and think about what would you play in this position. So carrying on the theme of in the game they messed it up. That's exactly what happened. In the game they messed it up. King c5. Black just brought their rook across to h4. Rook f7. Sensible place for the rook to go. Black took the h-pawn. The king came down to d4, but we've already got a horizontal cutoff. And you can see the white rook's in a silly place, and the black king and pawn are well placed to sort of advance that g-pawn up the board, possibly with a bit of help from this rook blocking stuff on g3 as well. So king g4, king e4, g5, rook back to f1. Rook g3 was played in the game. If king h4, you could argue that's even simpler. You can see the perfect cut straight away. But rook g3, we saw rook h1, rook g2, and black just sort of carried on shuffling their way down the board. And yeah, I mean, there's not much more to look at here. Are we going to see a strange conversion, or are we going to see a textbook? Oh, textbook Lucena. How about this? Rook straight back to the 4th rank. Oh, I love it. Brilliant. So, oh, hang on. What was that? What were those moves? Oh, yes, refusing to do another check. It's like, okay, I'll build a bridge one file further down. So in the game, the player with the white pieces messed it up with king c5, but there is a draw here, and it's just based on not letting the h-pawn go, really. Rook f7. If rook h4, rook down to f3, and if rook to d3, we go rook back to h7. There isn't a way for black to sort of come and threaten rook h4 without letting our rook come back and defend this way. And in the meantime, if there's a king move, I guess we can start getting our king a bit closer to the action. I should have prepped this, but what would happen after king f4? Well, I'm right, king c5 would be a good opening move, for example. So, yeah, Rook f7 was the way to go in that one.